Hi, hey, today's objective is to help people pass the ICC Commercial Electrical Inspector Certification Exam. This is going to be reviewing the 2020 NEC. There's newer versions available, 2023, but the reality is if you can pass in the 2020 version, you can pass in the 2023. Of all 18 exams I've taken, this has been the hardest for me. It required the most prep work. I have a few tips and tricks that can help you, plus I went ahead and created an online series of questions. There's 6 total tests. They actually mimic and actually are taken from the actual test. Point is, when you take a look at this, I'll show you this in a second, I'm basically giving you the test. So you'll be able to have the test, the superset of the questions. It'll give you about 75% of the test questions and answers. So above and beyond that, though, the one thing that's unique about this is understanding the table of contents and then going through the index. Unlike ICC codes and standards, the index for the NEC is actually pretty solid. They did a pretty good job with it. One thing that you do need to do occasionally as you're going through these questions that I'm about to show you is after you've gone through this a few iterations, and you've circled back to start it again, if you don't know where it is, the reference, when you look it up, one thing I found very helpful is to update the index with a keyword and a page number or an article number. What that'll do is it'll help you be able to come back and pass that. So I'm going to do a couple things here. I want to show you the online quizzes, how they work, and then just run through a few key phrases and how the code's laid out. What I really emphasize here is after you've gone through these questions, you've marked, highlighted your code like this, underline keywords and highlight the references, or at least portions of the references I give you. After that, go through the table contents and learn the layout of the code, where things are. After you've done that, go through the index and get a feel for what's in there and what you can look up. This process is going to help you be 4.0 and make sure you pass it. I think of all the tests I mentioned before, it was the hardest one for me, but I honestly think this is the hardest test if you're not familiar with the NEC. I went into this without a lot of familiarity with the NEC. I had to study a lot for this. So with that said, let me just show you what the actual test looks like here. So go to catchsunlight.com, QFPE. I've mentioned in other videos, I set this up to help qualified fire protection engineers gain some code understanding. Just place 6 different quizzes. CEI stands for Commercial Electrical Inspector. So each of these are 100 questions each, except for quiz 6, which is a little less. Let's pop open CEI quiz 1. One thing you'll notice, look, I made these questions after I took the test, and I put a lot of time into this. This took me probably 80 hours to write all this up. It took a long time. Went ahead and referenced what I did in the actual ICC test, talking to other people, accumulating some questions they saw. I took a prep course. I took information from that. And basically all of this is the references you need to know for 75% of the questions and the answers. Now, in some of this, I ran out of time. I wanted to get something up, and it would take me so long to get, 3 additional multiple choice question or answers for each question. So some of these, most of them, the vast majority of them, have just the answer as well as the question. But as you can see in this case, this is definitions. I go in chronological order. So what you're going to see starting, from the beginning is just terminology, code enforcement, things like that. Here you're jumping into Article 110, etc. Okay, so if you go down, obviously these questions, it's obvious, it's the one available, but there's some that have multiple choice. So when you do them, just realize that it's a no-brainer, but some of them do need to be answered. Some of them don't. I did this a little bit differently just to save me time. This is accuracy. It's 4% are right. So I just, I picked 4 here arbitrarily out of 100. So, don't be too caught up on this decimal. It just helps you gauge things. If you take a look, I'll answer another one. It goes to 0.05 or 5%. So 5 out of 100. So that just helps you know if they're right or not. So let me go through. Let me show you just a few of these other ones. Next quiz. I'm already at Article 210 and on Article 240. Next quiz, Article 242, Article 314, etc. You can go through, you can do this on your own. You just get the gist. Quiz 5, quiz 6 is the final one. In that quiz, we only have 71 questions. No sense to make 29 more questions, so I left it at 71. So what you do here, I want to show you what you need to do. Okay, so let's take an example. Let's go ahead and take one of these quizzes really quick and look at some of the questions offered. Just try to understand it. So in this case, I just arbitrarily went to the second test. These questions are not all perfect, okay, in terms of grammar and some punctuation, things like that, but they're pretty solid in terms of the referencing and the questions that are being asked. They're going to be directly off the test for the most part. That's what you're going to see. So let's just arbitrarily take question 5 here. Kitchen receptacle requirements shall be supplied by not fewer than. So how many circuits do you need for a kitchen? I think those, you out there that have built before, it's 2. Let's go ahead and take a look, though, at what Article 210.52 says. So let's look up Article 210.52. So let's get over to Article 210. Okay, branch circuits, Article 210. Let's look at .52. There's .6, .9, .19. Jump over to .52. There it is. Okay, dwelling unit receptacle outlets. And it's B3. So if you look at 210.52, let's go to subsection B. And let's see, where are we at here? There's A, B. There it is right there. B3. So let's go to B3. B3, 3 digits. Kitchen receptacle requirements. So receptacles installed in a kitchen to serve countertop surfaces shall be supplied by not fewer than 2 appliance branch circuits. Done. There's your answer. And you see how I highlighted a portion of the reference and underlined it. Now, in this particular question, I gave 2 references here. It basically is going to say the same thing in 210.11c1. But in any event, let's just stick with this one. It gives you your answer, but if you want to go highlight this as well, you can. So that's how you do it. You're going to go through this whole thing and basically answer every question, highlight every reference, underline the key phrases from the answers, and then go through that process 4 times. By the 4th time, you should be in a position to know the layout of the code, to know where your branch circuit is, to know where your fire protection, fire alarm system section is, to know where electric charging stations, that section, that article, you know where that is. A lot of that you can find from the index or from the table of contents, but that's the process. That's what you need to do to understand this. So I'll tell you what, let me just quickly, we honestly, for the sake of brevity, let's not go through the whole thing, but I think there's some benefit just kind of understanding how this lays out. So let's take a look at that, get a feel for it, gain an appreciation for how the highlights I have. So I bought an entirely new NEC to 2020 version of the NEC just for this test. So all these highlights are from the test, not necessarily my day job. I have different versions of the NEC for that. So I wanted one NEC just for the ICC test to help people through the process. So I work with several people at my day job, and my role is I'm the authority having jurisdiction for major nuclear research and waste handling site, sponsored by the government. So I have a lot of people I help out trying to be technically literate in the codes. You'll find, when in doubt, so let's say you have an example. I just want to talk about Chapter 1 or Article 100 really quick. It's important to know when you're looking at, let's say you have a test question and it asks something. I could actually go back. Let's go back to Article 100. Go back to the previous quiz, previous page. So Article 100, let's look at it. Now, if you typically, when you're going to be given a question from Article 100, the maximum current that a conductor can carry continuously without exceeding its temperature rating. Now, they're going to give you, 3 other choices here. And what the solution here is just, if you don't know where it is within the various articles other than 100, go to 100 and look up the definitions for each of the 4 items there. So in this case, ampacity, obviously it's the answer, maximum current in amperes that a conductor can carry continuously. So the definitions are specific to the NEC. You might think that the standard definition is going to be something different. Go to the definitions in the code for NEC specific definitions. And the process of elimination is what will get you the answer. Obviously, the 3 other answers you have in the actual test. And I want to be clear, this is an actual question from the test. This isn't just made up. This is a real legitimate question. The other 3 questions just would not match this definition. So that's how you basically find that. So let's go ahead and run through the code really quick. I want you just to see some of my highlights. Obviously not applied. The code, that particular section, and section 90 does not, it exempts the NEC from power generation plants. Go through the definitions. There's nothing really, there's actually a few things like a service, grounding electrode conductor versus grounding electrode. Know that. A feeder versus, a branch line versus a service line. Basically go through and know that. Understand there's a difference. Receptacle, okay, be clear, receptacle right here has a lot of definitions. Okay, like an outlet, a light that you're plugging in. A receptacle doesn't necessarily mean a 3-prong female receiver. There's a lot of things you could have there. So just know these, not necessarily know them, but highlight them. Highlight and underline as I've done. So I'm just going to make this really quick. I don't want to waste a lot of your time because I think you could do this on your own based upon the training curriculum that we've developed. But I do think it's beneficial to understand some of the highlights. And after you've highlighted, just go through it. So you can see how I've highlighted, but I also understood or circled keywords to help with the test. So there's just so many questions to go through. This is a incredibly in-depth document. You go with a commentary. So this is just the code. The commentary is actually a book, or the handbook, the NEC handbook, has a lot of commentary in it that has just a lot of depth associated with it. And what I mean by depth is a word that you're going to see in the code, there's a lot of nuance in that word in terms of what it can mean relative to the code. And that's why the commentary is important in your day job, but if you're taking the test, just take in the standard code. I've often found it's much more difficult if you take in a code commentary or an NFPA handbook to a test than it is just having the actual code. It becomes cumbersome finding things. So, your lighting, load, calculations, some of this stuff, I do have some... Within the online test, I do have some calculations you're going to do on some of this stuff, like light loading calculations and stuff like that. But just basically go through, know where this is, demand factors. These help you derate your loads. Know the rule, dividing by square root of 3 for your. It's not going to be in here, but divide your voltage by square root of 3 for 3-phase. Look that up. Know how that works. That's a question you're going to be asked on. I may not have that represented, but kind of know some basics about that. The real challenge I had is sizing. To this day, I still have a challenge sizing grounding conductors, but what I'm talking about sizing are if you have a box and you have different conductors, there's a lot of different things that go into calculating the required area. So just kind of know how to do that. I have some examples highlighted here. What I recommend, just slow down this video, highlight the stuff I've highlighted. If you want to do that before you take the online tests, it'll help you. It makes it a lot quicker so you don't have to look it up. So there's a formula there, 480 divided by 277. Another example, 45 kilovolt amp. Divided by 1.73 times 208 times 1.25 equals 156. This was an actual test question in terms of calculating fuses, inverse time circuit breakers. So Just when I have things like that represented in this video, might want to take a little bit more time to understand that. The answer from the text, from the actual questions on the test, was 40 amps here. Just look at that reference. It'll help you. That's actually the answer. What I'm telling you is the answer from the test. Okay, not just an arbitrary question that I have. The actual ICC test. Okay, let me see here. Painfully boring, guys, but if you're wanting to pass, this is not easy, okay? So the average Joe just trying to learn the NEC, probably not something you want to look at if you're the kind of person that wants to pass this test on the first time. Yeah, for this example, the actual test question was, what are permitted methods for attaching grounding conductors? You can go through this. What's not there is solder. In fact, across the board, you can never have soldered connectors for your connections. It's going to ask you that. So I just want to reiterate my strategy here. I'm specifically not reading these. I'm just showing you them, okay? So not grounded conductor was the answer to this system. I don't remember what it was. Grounded conductors shall not be connected to equipment grounding conductor or to the grounding electrodes. And they had a list of answers, and the answer was not a grounded conductor or something like that. 10 feet is the answer to that one. I have it underlined here, 6 meters or 20 feet. I have 20 feet there. Rods and pipe electrodes give you some materials you can use. Rod types, thicknesses, plate electrodes, blah, blah, blah. Just read it on your own, okay? One thing that I found helpful is if you could go through your NEC, your 2020 NEC, and just follow along on this video, stop every page, and just highlight what I highlighted. And if you do that before you take the series of those 6 tests that I created, it'll help you speed things up. Because rather than looking up the right verbiage, it'll already be highlighted in your code book. And it'll just expedite things. You'll be able to do it a lot faster if you do it that way. Everywhere you see an E, that's basically where I pulled a question from for the most part. So if you have an E there, that kind of thing, that means I had a question of some sort that I dealt with, either directly by taking the ICC test or from other people that took the ICC test, this CEI, or from a prep course. That's where these E's came from. Okay, so you are guaranteed to be able to understand and pass the test if you know where all this stuff is. And it's from these E's that I developed the course, the online questions. Yeah, good luck to you. I've talked to a lot of people that have failed this test. It was actually kind of scary. In fact, one of my friends, he went and took it. I was going to take it with him, but I didn't. He gave me a call that night after he took it. He said he failed it. And that kind of freaked me out a little bit because I thought I was, fairly prepared because he was fairly prepared and we'd studied together. But I ended up taking the whole weekend. I mean, like nonstop. Friday night, Saturday, Sunday, even Monday, just to go over the table of context and the index. And then I finally took that on Tuesday, even though I'd put like just an enormous amount of time into studying in advance of that. So that put me over the top, I think. Having friends that you can study with makes a big difference. Use them as guinea pigs. Yeah, I hope this is helpful. Hey, I'll tell you what, put in the comments if you think this is helpful or not. It would just, I've made some of these videos, and if I go through and explain stuff, I mean, it's hours long, and I know you don't want to listen to me speak for hours. So that's why it's just better if you see the highlights and just read them on your own, because it's pretty straightforward if you combine this with the questions.
that were created, that I've created, and it'll help you out. Even if you go through all this, and if you don't know the table of contents and the index, you probably are not going to pass. You need to go through, study it, but you really need to learn the layout of the code. There's just too many questions that they can throw at you all over the place. It was a hard test. Let me give you an example. As you look at this, I remember one question that a gentleman told me to do. It was, what's the height for an outdoor charging system for an electric car, right? So, I looked up the number, highlighted it, all that, and then I went into the test, and it actually wasn't that. What it was like, it was an indoor charging location, and the number was different, but it was in the same section, so I was able to look that question up really quick and pass it. So it's that, I'm just using that as an example. So it's that kind of thing that you're looking for. That's why it's so good to know the layout of the code. And these highlights and these practice examples, these practice questions, they're just going to help you be able to pass this. You'll be able to answer some of the questions really fast, and then the ones that you can't, you have the time to answer. Take your time, look up. But when you know the layout of the code, you're going to be able to answer those so much faster. So while you're looking at this, who am I? So I am registered as an engineer in mechanical engineering and fire protection engineering. And I've been the AHJ at my site for many years. So I have a lot of experience in real world application. Plus I used to own my own contracting firm, building firm. So a little bit of experience with this. Just, enough to be dangerous, but also enough to help you pass. I'm also a Master Code Professional. I recently got that designation, which is kind of hard to get. So not a lot of people have it, but by having the combination of the contractor experience, the engineering background, and the code knowledge, it kind of wraps things up into a nice package. You have the understanding of how to install, the understanding of what the codes say, and the understanding of what a performance-based analysis looks like. Now, I honestly don't deal a lot with electric. Wired plenty of homes, but I've not really designed a lot. Certainly had some college classes, but that's about as far to the theory as it gets. So you probably have a lot more solid experience than I do, but even with my limited experience, I was able to pass, and hopefully I can help you do the same thing. One other thing I really like doing, you see these tabs over here along the sides? I really recommend that before you go into the test, particularly with your bigger books. I already did a video on the International Energy Conservation Code, and if you follow that video, I went through my notes in that book. I didn't have any of these tabs, but it was pretty small and pretty straightforward. When you're dealing with a big book like this, it's a deal breaker. If you don't have the tabs and you're trying to find stuff and it slows you down, you're not going to find it. You're actually going to struggle so much that you're going to miss the deadline and lose. And I think the NEC CEI, could be wrong, it was 3.5 or 4 hours and 80 questions. So it's pretty generous in terms of time, but I took every last minute when I did this test. When I pressed that submit button, I really wasn't sure if I was going to pass or not. So more power to you if you can figure it out. Now, the reason I'm doing this is I kind of wish somebody would have done this for me, so I thought I'd build this YouTube channel and just go through my books and my notes. And if people want the help, great. If they don't, great. But I think it would have made a big difference for me if somebody would have helped me with this. So that's the intent here. There's no profit margin. I'm just giving my time away. And it's good for me, though, in terms of developing, going through it to remember a little bit. So there is some positives from that perspective, but the reason I put this together on my website is just to help you out. I'd like to see more people with a good knowledge of the codes. And the other thing, I think with the dawn of artificial intelligence, it's going to take a lot of white-collar jobs away. And I think what's going to be left over is the skill of the craft. And I think what you need to do to develop the skill of the craft is understand the codes and do the hands-on, the field work. But I think that's the future. We're going to have to ramp up construction big time. And to do that, we need a lot more personnel that has the finesse to build stuff. And that requires, like I said, the code knowledge. So this is, I think, a really purpose-driven endeavor here. If we can make it easier for people to understand these kind of codes. The other thing that bothers me is, currently in like New York State, I looked at the ICC numbers recently for construction costs. I think 2024 numbers were published, but it's $200 to $450 a square foot for construction. Out here in Idaho, I think it's $160 to $250, just to give you a feel. Look, I don't know about you, but I can't pay that. And with all the boomers retiring and putting their money in more conservative investments, what's going to happen is there's less money to lend and interest rates have to go up. The other thing that affects interest rates are government spending, which obviously is over the top. Put all that together, what that means is high interest rates and high costs for construction. What that equals is more people are going to have to do it themselves. So to do it yourself, if you get the IEC, the ICC CEI, the Commercial Electrical Inspector, that goes a long way when it comes time to wire your house and deal with your inspector. If they know you have the CEI, they're going to leave you alone for the most part. Makes a big difference. Same thing with other stuff, not just the electrical. Typically, you're going to have building, electrical, mechanical, sewer inspections, insulation inspections, which is really rolled into the building inspection. But the unique inspectors are always going to be building, plumber, and electrical. So if you could do the NEC piece, goes a long way to giving you some freedom. You don't really need this. This is so much harder than the residential electrical inspector. If you did this and then you go past this, I just roll right over and do the residential electrical inspector too. You do both of them. Or just start with the electrical inspector. A lot of these questions are going to be the same for residential and commercial. A lot of these questions are not going to be in the residential section. So that's a big piece. Like park trailers, for instance. Some of this stuff you're going to see on the residential, like mobile home, stuff like that. It's not really park trailers, but like, for instance, the length of your service line is going to be different for a mobile home. Your amperage rating is going to be different, 50 amps. For a mobile home versus 100 amps for a house. Your boat power is going to have different amps and different lengths and different protections. So there are some overlap. There's some overlap between commercial and residential. Let's see. I thought this was. Oh yes, signs. There's a couple interesting things here. I remember. Let me just show you one thing though that's interesting on electric signs. Within sight of the sign, it's defined as 50 feet? I can't remember, but look at this, and line of sight. Within sight has a definition. It's not what do you call it, italicized, but I believe it's 50 feet. So just keep that in mind, that there are some definitions here, and that would be important for you to know that, because it came up in a couple places that I've seen relative to... in other words, you have to have ready access or accessible, power switches, but it has to be within line of sight, and that means 50 feet away as well as line of sight. You can't go over 50 feet. I think it's 50. It's been a little while since I looked it up, but what I'm telling you is look it up in your definitions, and it'll help you. Okay, office furnishings, multi-wire receptacles, cranes. Let's see, more machinery, traveling cables. Okay. Apologize for the delays, folks, but if you're following this, oh yeah, here's some formulas too. Square root of 3, I think at 1.73, square root of 3, just keep that in mind for power. And I give you an example case here and some that I quoted from the actual test that I created, but it actually came from the test. So just to help you out, here's another one over here, another example, welding 30 amps, how to calculate your actual required load, which is 200% in this case. It goes through electric welders. Oops. All right, let's see here. So we got some cable types, sensitive electronic equipment, X-ray. There's something unique with this, portable X-ray. I don't remember the question, but when you see it, there's a unique definition with portable. Kind of came up. So just take a look at that when you look at the question, if you get through all 671 questions that I have posted. You got irrigation systems. There you go. Swimming pools. A lot of questions on Article 680, so be aware of swimming pools. You definitely will be asked about grounding electrode conductors and bonding and offsets to main GFCI protection. There's a lot of questions there at 680, so definitely highlight the stuff I have. My notes, 8 feet high there if you can't read that. There's a section to go look at to make sure you can get that right. Device ratings. Solar, now PVs, this is one thing to keep in mind, 690. A lot of changes are coming. I honestly don't know if there's some differences in the 2023 versus 2020 for PVs. Photovoltaics, that's what you call them, PVs. But definitely some stuff here that highlight, the stuff I highlight is what you need to look at. But my concern is that you're going to see changes coming, and I don't know, I think it's fairly mature. Fire pump, 695. Keep in mind, too, when you're sizing this, you have to size for lock motor current. That's something that gets AHJs. Maybe not be from the test, but just keep that in mind when you're looking at it. I deal with the emergency systems sections a lot more than other sections in my profession. Yeah, I can't remember, but keep in mind, standby is 60 seconds and emergency is 10 seconds. So they might ask you that here in this section. Or to test that way. To go through this, all 700 or 671 questions, free to go through and highlight and go through 4 times. Honestly, you can probably do it in 40 hours of intense work. Your head will hurt, but, I honestly think it's easier if you just lump the time together and focus on just this. So, take a week off from work, go through this, because if you just do 2 hours a night type thing, what ends up happening is you just forget stuff. Now, I'm not saying 2 hours a night's not a bad thing. I studied for some of my tests using that strategy. Well, all my tests. But I do think that if you do focus nonstop for a week, you're going to end up learning this better. And then just take the test really fast after cramming like that. I've definitely done that, but generally I personally don't have the time to take off for that. Chapter 9, tables. go. I have another example here of a, yeah, the 2.5 conduit times 8. Yeah, just go back. When you look at these tables in terms of what size you need and how long of an extension you need for pull, has to do if you're pulling straight through, etc. Just look at this section 314.28a, A1. So I have some references here that'll help correlate these tables to reality. I don't envy you. You know, it's going to be really hard to do this. It is not easy, but if you can pull it off, gives you a lot more flexibility. So wire types, wire insulation types, and different temperatures and sizes, etc. These tables. And these tables are really handy to look through. I'd recommend doing it. All right, that's the last one. Okay, so let's see. Let me just quickly see if there's anything in the index help you with. The NFPA indexes they're just so good, you know. I don't think I really had to do anything with the index on this one. I do all the time on the ICC ones, but it's good enough you don't need to worry about it. So hey, thanks for watching this. I hope you got something out of it. I know I went through fast, but look, it saves you time, saves me time. Go through that test that's created. Go through it 4 times. So you got to go through it 4 times. Just so you know the layout. Anyway, thanks for watching this. I wish you the best. If you pass, let me know in the footnotes or in the comments to this YouTube video. Let me know if this is helpful. If it's a waste of my time and your time, I won't do it. But I do think there's some benefit. I'd like to have it recorded just for my benefit as much as anybody else's, so I can go back through this in a few years. Anyway, hey, thanks for your time. You have a good day. Good luck.